You know what I find funny about this article? It isn't even the fact that what they're doing is illegal, and the fact that it's very threatening, and well, this is moderator logic. You know, if they don't like the way you vote, they're gonna threaten you, intimidate you, or at the very least preemptively threaten and intimidate you, so that either you don't vote, you're scared to vote, or you just vote the way they want you to avoid force. But what gets me about this is that this is nothing new. In 2004, the Black Panthers circulated around polls, carrying batons and everything. Now, mind you, they didn't actively threaten people with words, but they did have a threatening demeanor, and that was intentional. Now, whether or not it had any psychological impact on voters, I don't know. I sincerely doubt it, though. I don't think anyone needs the Black Panthers' assistance to win an election, and in fact, by doing such a thing, it only makes it worse. But the fact is that they feel obligated to do this. And I see a lot of similarities between conservatives and liberals. And while they have different tactics, they have different methods, the end result is the same. They both want to centralize power into the hands of whoever they consider a constituent. And what gets me about the whole voter fraud fiasco, where you need photo ID in some states in order to vote and things like that, is the likelihood of voter fraud actually happening is almost about the same amount as getting pregnant by rape, which is very, very small. But let's make a big deal out of it anyway. That's the logistics of most of these political pundits. The fact is, whether or not you believe abortion is a right or needs to be regulated more or less or whatever, the fact is they're relying on your emotional state. They're playing on your emotion, saying that, well, what about all the women that get raped and pregnant? That's 32,000. Well, wow, when you say it like that, 32,000 sure sounds like a lot. But it isn't. Even if it was 32,000 per state, that would still not be a lot. But that's nationally. 32,000 amongst a population of over 30 million, 300 million is nothing. It's not even a minuscule. It's like a fraction of 1%. That is fucking ridiculous. Why even bring that up? You're only doing that to gouge some kind of emotional response that we cannot have any kind of regulation against abortion, or else lots of women will end up pregnant by rape. It's ridiculous. And so is this. This idea that somehow we have to have photo ID or else voter fraud will be committed in droves, and it's ridiculous. Most people don't know how to commit voter fraud, and why would they? When they could just, oh, I don't know, fucking vote. So the only people that have any want to commit voter fraud, any sort of meaning to it, any sort of motivation, are the special interest groups. People like the NRA, the ACLU, things like that. They have a reason to commit voter fraud, and they have the means to commit voter fraud. So if anyone is guilty of committing voter fraud, it's not going to be an individual. You're not going to see somebody and be like, hey, you individually, Bill, you committed voter fraud. It doesn't work that way. Voter fraud is conspiracy. It takes the conspiracy of a group of people to go about it. They have to have inside access. They have to have access to, the papers or the chips used to circulate the vote and things like that. So no, if there's going to be voter fraud, it's going to happen anyway because it's the people counting the votes that are going to commit the fraud, not the individual. And all the same, it's ridiculous to try to act like we can't touch abortion or else every raped woman is going to get pregnant and boo hoo hoo. It's just emotional garbage. And the only way to be immune to this is to not give a fuck. You have to just look people in the eye and say, I don't give a shit. It may be cold and heartless and ruthless, but it has to be done, or else you're going to fall for it every single time. As someone that takes the voting process seriously, I would like to see more democratic practices implemented rather than this oligarchy republic where you have to know the right people in order to get voted into office, yes, voter fraud pisses me off. But I know it's few and far between. They don't need voter fraud. The very bureaucracy of itself doesn't, it makes voter fraud obsolete. Why would you need voter fraud when you're already a republic where only you and your friends get to vote for one another? That makes no sense. And neither does it make any sense to, be so afraid of raped women getting pregnant everywhere when in fact abortion isn't going anywhere. They're not going to get rid of it. Mitt Romney is not as pro-life as he makes himself out to be. You know it, I know it, the Christian right knows it, the pro-choice know it, everybody fucking knows it. So, why even bother? It's just to gouge your emotions. It's just to make you have that deep sinking feeling of dread that you buy into. And the only way you're not going to buy into it is by just being a nihilist about it. I can't think of another way to say this. You just have to be like, oh fucking well, some people committed voter fraud. Some people get raped and get pregnant. Too bad. And because the moment you give validation to it, it gives them the opportunity to exploit it on whole new levels, way worse than the initial crime that they're worried about people committing. And that's what I say is moderator logic. That's the logic moderators use to ban people and to suppress opinion and to harass people and to, well, rape them. So essentially you're saying that you can't be trusted to be a law-abiding, decent citizen, so give us the authority to break the law and not be decent citizens and just do whatever the fuck we want to you because we know better. And, people might come to my channel arguing with me that that's the problem with government, libertarianism, blah, blah, blah. But no, it's not about government. It's about people. If people are like that, then every institution in between is going to be like that. And the reason why I argue against private ownership instead of government is because government is relative to the people, whereas private ownership isn't necessarily, since it's private ownership, since individuals and different groups control the private capital, they can have a different, stance. They can be different than the people as a whole. But the government is only as abusive and as bad as the people that are being governed, because it is the people that vote for them, it is the people that support them, it is the people that the government emulates. And while, there are corrupt politicians, while there are mishandlings of the law, while there are abuses, far and wide, when you have private capital, you're just inviting that all the more so. What do you think all this is about? You think this is honestly about some political ideology? Do you really think that this is just about a bunch of guys that are so fundamentalist about their beliefs that they're willing to go to these large extents? No, it's about money. It's about power. It's about the circulation of wealth and securing said wealth. It always is. So in order to get away from that, you have to get away from the idea of owning private wealth. You have to get away from the idea that life is a competition, that someone has to be above to command those at the bottom, or else you're never going to get rid of it. So, just something to think about.